whoever that is in your community that you might misunderstand a little or not quite understand, take the opportunity to learn about that person. That growth will change your brain. It doesn't mean you have to agree. It doesn't even mean you have to like each other. But it's about growing community. The essence of community isn't whether you're right or wrong. It's about how you function together as a team to grow.
And welcome back to the Badass Women in Business podcast. We have an incredible guest today, the Honourable Leela Aheer. She's a former Alberta cabinet minister and a leader known for championing women, culture, and community, which is probably why we're having her on the podcast today. She now drives global strategy across several organizations and continues to build bridges across sectors, cultures, and causes. Leela, welcome to the show. And the question, or actually the request we have for all of our guests, is to share how it started and how you got to where you are today. So I'll let you take the mic. Welcome.
It's so lovely to be with these badass ladies and to be part of the history that you're making here with this podcast. It's so interesting. I get asked this question because most people get to know you as a politician. And so they're like, well, how did you make this journey? And then when people find out I was a musician before that, they're really like, oh my goodness, how did that happen? But it's amazing to me. I think in my lifetime, I'm from Alberta and I was born in Edmonton. My father came from India in 1962 and then met my Caucasian little mom in a choir in Edmonton, if you can believe that. So here's this very beautiful chocolate-skinned man who joined a choir in Edmonton in the middle of winter, first winter, trying to figure out all the things in 1962, and like pure vegetarian, right? No snow boots, no nothing, trying to figure out the world there, and came in as a very young engineer. My father is extremely intelligent and had graduated from school earlier than most of his peers. So he was a very young man going into engineering in Edmonton and had a couple places to choose from. It was like minus 40 Edmonton, but ended up meeting my little redhead Irish, English, Scandinavian mother in the choir. And so you can imagine, I was born a year later after they met, and coming into the time in 1970s when seeing a couple of mixed background, mixed race like that, holding hands, walking down the street in Edmonton, right, would have been very interesting. So my life has always been extremely vibrant and colorful and full of very deep and very meaningful conversations that were triggered through just the culture of my family and the very interesting growing up in Alberta, which is this beautiful province of extreme get-her-done kind of people. And we've had some really interesting history with issues around racism and bigotry and all sorts of stuff. And we can go into discussions around that if it's of interest. But for the most part, I have to say my life and my understanding, if you ever spoke to my dad about this, he's such a patriot and loves this country so much and raised us with that same mentality to love Canada and everything that this beautiful country has given us. And then, of course, having incredible neighbors and being in such a safe part of the world, And we were also really blessed because my dad traveled a lot with us. He took us to India. He shared with us his culture. But truthfully, my little Caucasian mama, she's the one who taught me everything about Indian culture. So my dad comes from a family of 11. My mom was a single child, or only child, I should say. And so she literally learned how to cook all the South Indian food, learned how to put on saris, and then transferred all of that knowledge to me. I learned everything about Indian culture actually from my mom, because she just absorbed it all because she didn't have brothers and sisters of her own. So she got scooped up into this very large family in India. So when you fast forward all of that and you live in a small rural community where we grew up, I looked very different. We were a very unique looking family in that community. When I was 14 or 15, I was always really active. Like I joined every activated opportunity that was available out there at the time. And in rural Chestermere, it's not like we had access to a lot of stuff. So everything on our big 3 channels that we had on TV was like a really big deal. So I was always writing, and I'm a musician, so I was always like writing songs and, professing my deep frustration over the things that were going on globally at that time, in as much as we had access to at that time. So it was interesting when I don't know if you're familiar with the Calgary area as much, but just outside of, okay, so I live east of the city of Calgary. And so when you go into, at the time when I was a kiddo, the east part of Calgary was just sort of developing. And they had a new mall, Sunridge Mall, which is opening, like big freaking deals to go into the mall. And so my mom dropped us off so we could just, do our own thing. And there was a rally in the parking lot. And I was like, yes, what is this all about, right? So I walked over there, marched my little self over, and was wondering what was going on. And this guy came up to me and he goes, well, who are you? And I said, well, what is this all about? What's going on? And he goes, well, what's your background? Who are you? Like what? And I said very proudly, because I've been saying this my whole life, well, my dad's from India and my mom's from Canada and we live in Chestermere, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, well, you're an abomination. You have, what did he say? Destroyed the Christian white bloodline in your family. And I'm like 15 going, pardon me. I was so, I'd never been spoken to like that in my life. Like I'd seen things in my lifetime, but you have to understand, I grew up in a small community where you just all work together, right? And I thought I was Italian, truthfully, because all of my families around us were. And we were constantly in the Italian household. So I was sure I was part Mediterranean somewhere in there. But anyway, so I was so shocked by this behavior. And my little 15-year-old girl was just like, well, prove it, and of course I gave my mailing address and all these things. I'm like, I need to learn about these people. And what I realized later on is that they were part of a movement in southern Alberta, coming out of Caroline, Alberta, that was like an offshoot. They're not Ku Klux Klan, they're not KKK, but they're called the Aryan Nations. And it was quite a large movement at the time. And so they had sent me all of this information, mailed to my address, mailed me all this information of how I had, I was an abomination, all the things that they had said, and how, that we had to take, like the people had to take back the strength of this white Christian movement and all these kinds of things. And I was so shocked. And I showed my dad, and my dad was like, meh, whatever. He was so, again, like just loves the country and had very minimal issues himself growing up in this beautiful country. And so I went to my principal at Chestermere High School, Mr. Thomas, who I'm still friends with to this day. And I showed it to him and I said, what do I do about this? Like, this is just crazy. And he said, well, why don't you put on a little talk to the grade 10s and 11s in the lunch hour, and you can talk about this sort of thing. And so I put together this little thing about racism, and there was different language at the time than what we use nowadays. And the cutest thing that I remember to this day was one of my friends, I think he was Polish background. He said to me, he goes, racism, is that like car racing? Like, what are you talking about? Like, totally innocent, right? And even me, I had to take a step back and go, okay, well, what am I actually talking about here? Right? Because there was such I was the only person really of color at my school, right, for a long time. At that point, there was more of us, but when I first moved to Chestermere, I think I was probably one of the only. At that point, there was several of us in our grade that for our town at that time, it was pretty diverse, I would say. And we were just all trying to wrap our heads around what that actually meant and what that meant to our communities, because there was lots of issues between lots of different cultures. Like, if you can imagine, a lot of the farmers, there was Dutch farmers and Italian, they had all had issues coming into the country. And Alberta had legislation early on when the people who had been released from slavery in Oklahoma and the southern parts of the United States started coming to Canada. And if you can believe it, the original chambers of commerce in Alberta were concerned that too many Black people were coming to Alberta, and so had issued a statement saying that Black people's noses were too wide, so that they shouldn't come to Alberta because the winter would impact them. This is documented. So we have a history of greatness, and we have a history of some really, really nasty things that have happened. Canada has obviously history that we have to deal with First Nations, with our Chinese, with the Japanese, with lots of different cultures that have come in. But we're growing and we're getting better all the time. But it requires us as people to constantly not revisit for the bad reasons, but to revisit to remember where we're coming from in order to be able to leverage the strength of where we've come from in order to move forward. And so they really pushed me to get involved in women's rights, to march across our country on behalf of those kinds of things. And back in the day, the pro-life and the pro-choice people were a lot more connected. It was about the health and well-being of the child or the woman. And there was a lot more connection over the reasons for that versus the very, very polarized discussions that go on nowadays in these things. And I think, again, if we're not talking about it from a very granular personal level, I think it's a very, very difficult. We get into this stuff around the rights of people when the slippery slope of all of these kinds of things. Sorry, I'm just diving right in. But the slippery slope of all of these kinds of things is when you take away one person's rights, whether you agree or disagree with the format of that, somebody else will be impacted. And that's the deeper issues of those have to be what we talk about. We can talk about lots of different examples where I think that that's extremely relevant. And that pushed me into looking at human trafficking, at various other things. And I was so blessed in the legislature to be able to pass very strong legislation on some of those things. And I say strong loosely because it's some of the first legislation of its kind in North America, but needs a lot of work and it requires a non-ideological and very strong and a strong approach to making sure that there are strong consequences for these kinds of things that happen. And I mean, honestly, if I could prevent a single child from ever being hurt in this way, I would pretty much do anything I could to make sure that that doesn't happen, or a vulnerable person from being pulled into this area. I would do pretty much anything in my lifetime to try and fix that. So again, if we're talking about it from this space of where we need to go, what that looks like, especially with new technology and all these kinds of things coming on. And sorry, my dog's in the background. You're going to get a picture of my puppy. I think that the more we talk about it, the more nuanced it is, the better the legislation and the less ideological and the less polarized. And I think one of the most important things we can do, and when I originally went into university in political sciences, and I was so disillusioned by what was happening in political sciences on both, I guess I didn't refer to it as left and right at the time, but it was so, I was in university when the war was happening in the middle, and Canada went to cap the wells that had been set on fire. And we were talking about the military and all of these kinds of things. And I was just so proud of our peacekeepers going into areas like that to literally help with trying to reset what was happening at that point. And there were so many people that were against the military and against our people in service. And it really moved me to another point. And when I found out in political sciences about the ideological perspectives that were being in, I couldn't find a space where I could participate in that conversation in a meaningful way. And oddly enough, I ended up going into music at that point in time because I thought, well, if I can't change things over here, I'm going to use my voice elsewhere. And I ended up teaching for like 100 years. And you end up being involved in the community at a very, volunteer level and, working with all the kids and the various families. And then they asked me to run for politics, which is ironic. I mean, talk about full circle. And I never thought I had such imposter syndrome going into that whole situation. And I was elected by 260 votes on my first go around. I had to hustle, man. And the fellow that I ran against, I had helped him with his last campaign and I taught his children. So you can imagine from a very personal level, it really divided our community. And so I had to work really hard in my first iteration as an elected official to earn the people that didn't vote for me. And then in the second part of it, I was the deputy leader and a minister in the government at that point in time, which quickly ended because I'm not a good girl and I do not sit quietly, and voiced my opinions very loudly and proudly. Makes me highly unelectable, I think, in the world of politics these days. But I think it granted me and earned me credibility in the side of authenticity and servant leadership. which were, of course, the most important things to me at that time, and has then brought me full circle into this space of bilateral trade and working across cultures and hopefully helping to build my country alongside of other countries. Because I think our politicians, for better or for worse, whatever it is that they're doing, and they're all doing good and bad things in their own ways, you and I and those who are doing the groundwork here, we are truly the new diplomats and the people who really have the voices to be able to work cross-culturally and to look at people. We can have, it's very important to have strong opinions about lots of things that are going on in the world, especially when it comes to the rights of vulnerable people. Having said that, though, not knowing particularly every culture and what everybody is going through, we have to be understanding of those people and what they're going through, and at least be open to the conversation before you're going to make your own judgments. We all will. That's just part and parcel of being human. But we're global. We are a global community. We have requirements that go beyond our own spaces. And as Canadian, for a Canadian, or if you're American, if you're blessed to live in a Western democracy where we have these freedoms and rights, our goal has to be able to understand what that privilege looks like and to elevate that as much as we can in our own countries. Pointing fingers at other countries, while I believe is probably necessary at times, requires a tremendous amount of thought and understanding of that culture before you just start poking fingers. In our countries, like in Canada in particular, we're a baby country. We're brand new. The rights of women have to be forefront in the legislation and cannot be played around with in our country. But when we're looking at other countries, we have to understand that we have thousands years old practices there that require a tremendous amount of understanding and nuance to understand where they're coming from. But in the country where I live in and where I could potentially legislate, there is no question for me about the strength of women, girls, and vulnerable people that require us in legislation to make sure they have everything they have to be as strong as powerful. If we believe in the rights of women and the strength of girls and women, we're 52% of the population. There is just nowhere in my lifetime where it's okay that a woman be used, manipulated, or undermined in any way, shape, or form, especially under the law. So yeah, there you go. Hello.
Well, welcome. That was an amazing, literally trip back down memory lane for you. And just seeing how life circumstances at such a young age can shape our entire lens, future, and how we see our ability to go and make an impact. You could have walked away from those situations you experienced when you were younger and come out with a completely different perspective. So my question is, like, what was it in you, that piece in you that said, I can make a difference. I have a voice. I am one that can make a change in this moving forward. Like, where did that come from at such a young age?
You know, I was surrounded by incredibly strong women in my community. I don't know if you've ever been part of a farming community, but the women there are just, there's no filter. And it's very strong and they're very competent in their spaces. You know, that competency is really elevated with the women around them. And so I was never afraid to have, like, I was really fortunate. Like in my young life, my mom and dad we were musicians, and my dad's an engineer, and my mom was involved at the volunteer level in our community. So I've been door knocking since, like, I think I was 11 and I babysat everybody in my community. So I knew everybody. And when you grow up in a community like that, there's a tremendous amount of accountability, right? Because everybody knows who you are. You can't get away with a single little thing. So being a good person and being grassroots and working in the community is how you express yourself. It's how you show your love. It's how you show your community involvement. And little communities like ours at that time couldn't function. They couldn't grow without the volunteers and without, you know, people bringing food to each other, or, you know, they would drive across the field to their friends' fields if their, you know, machines broke down to help out with combining, or, you know, if the cattle were coming in and their births were happening in the middle of November when it's like, you know, minus whatever, everybody's helping out with calving and warming up the babies. Or, you know, if you have an emergency, like people could call on our party line on our phone and get me at 2:00 in the morning to go babysit their kids. And sometimes you had to walk half a kilometer to their house, right, to get to them. But this is what we did. There was just this sense of community. And in our household, we had so many musicians and intellectuals come through our house, and those people had so much time for this little kid, right? To have adult conversations, for lack of a better word. And I remember, I think I was 7 or 8, and I had seen all of these incredible pictures of these rock star women in Afghanistan who were like lawyers and teachers and politicians back in the day when like Afghanistan was just this country where women were just leading the country. And I thought to myself, I think I was 8 years old. I thought, I want to go there one day, and I want to set up a business and work with all these beautiful women that were just leading. And then finding out later on about, the Taliban and all of this coming in and reducing women's rights. And again, not to point fingers at particular cultures, but this was a culture that was well on its way to leading globally of where it would be. And then you can see what can happen when the wrong people get in and can completely destroy a culture and its evolution, and probably evolving faster than many of these other cultures that were out there. That really impacted my life. And I don't know, I guess I realized early on by these beautiful adults that were around me that they made me believe that my voice mattered. So I guess I just never assumed for a moment that it didn't. I actually didn't realize that my voice didn't matter until I became an adult and people start telling you or try to shift or manipulate, your conversation. And that just made me more activated. But, it is what it is.
There were so many things that you just said that reminded me of the book Untamed by Glennon Doyle, because the whole point of that book is to say that from a young age, women or girls are told to be quiet, be polite, sit down, listen, not get dirty, and behave. But there is this nature inside that keeps coming out and is pushing us towards our own greatness. And so the fact that your parents encouraged you to be yourself, act as yourself, and even your principal, I mean, the push towards leadership, I think is amazing, and probably led you to your badassery of today. So I'm curious, over we've talked about different cultures and whether they're East or West. And I'm curious how you've seen women leadership evolve in the last 20 to 30 years, and what you've seen happening, especially in Western cultures that are known as more progressive, and the fact that somehow we're having issues pushing them to their greatness.
Oh boy, this is a loaded question. And I apologize, this may be a bit controversial where I go with this, but did you just recently see Michelle Obama saying that, why would I run? She goes, you're not ready for women leadership yet. Like and I sit more in conservative circles, just to be very clear about because I'm a fiscal person. Like I look at, not that others can't be. I think that there is an amazing opportunity for fiscal responsibility to spread across all parties. And I'm sort of agnostic and anti-party these days, as you can well imagine. And I think Prime Minister Carney in our country is just doing a fantastic job. I think as far as leadership goes, and I've never really voted Liberal in my lifetime. I love this guy. I think he's doing a great job. So I'm super proud of him. And let's see what happens in the next little while. But okay, this is a hard question. I think that women are great. So let's just start there. Greatness is already part of who we are. I get frustrated sometimes, but get also caught in the same conversation of empowerment and all of those kinds of things, because I think that we still need to have women believe that they have capacity, even though empowerment should be part of the way that we leverage our strength in society, right? It just should be a normal part. So I don't mean to be hypocritical, but I am going to be, because this is the frustrating part for me, is that an empowered woman isn't necessarily seen as the strength with which she brings forward, depending on how she's interpreted. You might be too loud, too noisy, all of the things you were saying, be quiet. But it's also women that have the high heels in the throats of other women trying to make them do that, because we don't believe there's enough light for all of us. And so we've been that we've been pre-designed, or I'm not sure what the right language is, or taught or
Conditioned.
Conditioned. Yeah, I hate using that word too, but you're right. Because I refuse to be conditioned. And I'm not going to allow that to be an excuse, but let's use that word for now. That we are a small part of the population, and we're a massive part of the population, and we look at things differently. Our lens is so necessary, and we don't agree on anything, which is the best part about women, because the best politics, the best policy, the best opportunities come somewhere in the middle. Nobody's happy, okay? But it starts at a point where we can all have a jumping off point. And then the whole point of the law is that as legislators, that you can amend and change things as the evolution happens. If you look at culture, for example, if we see culture as like this ideological thing and that's it and we'll never evolve. Culture must evolve. In the East Indian culture, we see that as part of our, if you look at Hindus, for example, Hindu is a name that came to us from a colonial perspective. We're actually called Sanatan, which is thinkers, right? It's a background of evolutionary. It's not just a religion, it's a cultural perspective of evolution and understanding that reflective nature of who you are, and that there's a requirement for that to emerge and be part of who you are. And for me, the hardest thing for me, what I've been learning is you're an equal amount speaker, equal amount listener. As you can tell, I can speak without breathing, and, becoming an equal parts amount listener and incorporating the best things and even the worst things of people that you may not understand, understanding those pain points is ultimately how, to answer your question, Aggie, to understand how women need to be able to come forward. We have to be willing to understand that it's the same thing. Your weaknesses are your strengths, right? And how do you leverage that? That's the question that we have to answer. That we have to ask. Are we ready for women leadership? Sure. We have a woman leader here in our province of Alberta. Do I agree with everything she does? Oh my God, no, not even close. In fact, far, far from it. But I love the fact that she's there. I love the fact that she is a strong woman. And while I don't agree with a lot of the stuff that she does, her being there, and even previous to that, we had Rachel Notley, who was the NDP leader, didn't agree with a lot of stuff she did either. But I love debating her in the legislature. The woman's a rock star debater, as is our new premier right now. And what it does is what I learned. You have to meet people you viscerally disagree with. You have to have the conversations, because if you believe in servant leadership, you need to be able to serve the people that you least agree with to understand their pain points in order to understand what society needs. We've lost community. We've lost society. We're not having babies, right? I'm a natalist. I believe in children everywhere. And that doesn't mean you have to have them or they have to be your own. You don't even have to like kids. But the world needs to be open. There is no reason to work towards anything if we don't have the next generation of people and leaders to work towards. And that in itself changes the entire mentality of how we look at legislation and what that future means. It means that we're not building roads and bridges and things for us. And I don't mean that literally, I mean that metaphorically as well too. These are pathways and opportunities and, sorry to use a cliche, breaking glass ceilings. So more barriers and more glass ceilings are going to be put in the way, but that's growth, isn't it? The whole point is to break the damn thing. The whole point is to gently smack it open, and maybe it's a small crack in it. Maybe it's smashing it. Maybe it's a bulldozer. Maybe you're just thinning the glass a little bit so that, you have an echo through that chamber. All of that is relevant. And we don't have to do everything at once, but we have to be having a momentum and a wave of building and not destruction, and a wave and a tsunami that creates momentum between brothers and sisters globally that look at the opportunity that is there. We're 52% of the population. We're going to be the largest earners, the largest taxpayers, the biggest decision makers in business. In the next 50 years, women are going to own more businesses. In Alberta, we punch way above our weight in private sector and small business. For every 60 women in Canada to every 100 men in Alberta, we're over 80 women in small businesses. We understand the niche. We understand how to function in COVID or whatever it is. You know, we're managing children on one hip, a business in the other, the family finances, and all of the drama that comes along with managing a family. These are amazing skill set. So that skill set needs to be, have you ever heard a woman go, well, I'm just this? It's like, how did we ever put the word just in front of anything that we do? Ever. It is just such a direct attack on the very essence of who we are as women. So sorry, really long-winded answer.
No, that and starting a sentence with, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, and I do that all the time. I am so bad at that. And I called myself stupid today to one of my, like, because I was just like not functioning.
If someone's listening to this and they're feeling inspired, but don't know how to take the first step to being somebody that can help create change in action, may it even be in their small community or something even larger, how do people start getting involved?
Okay, everything matters. So are you voting? Number one. In our municipal election recently, 38.9% of the people showed up to vote. Isn't that disgusting? In our civil elections at the city of Calgary. Absolutely appalling. I actually did a TEDx talk just recently on voting and democracy. At the very most basis level in a Western democracy, get your tuchus out of your house and vote. That matters, because when you do that, you engage in a different way. You learn about the leadership, you learn about who, and even if it's a bridge too far, even if you don't like that person, putting your mark on that moment changes your engagement levels with the people who are working for you. Then when you do that small thing, go out and help a candidate, door knock, help fundraise. These things happen in a cycle every 4 years or whatever your location is to be able to help out. And we need volunteers. Did you know that most campaigns now have to pay for volunteers to come out and door knock and help? You have to get out of the door, especially if you're a new person to that country. You might not be able to vote yet, but help a candidate, get to know who they are, find out what the policies are. How does that, especially if you're from a small community of people that maybe you're a new Canadian and you're in a particularly cultural space, find out how that politician or group of people or that party is acknowledging your culture within the larger culture of Canada or the United States or wherever you happen to be. The only way to answer your question, Christy, is that we have to feel that we're valued enough ourselves in the mirror to feel that we can step forward into something like this. And if I need to give you permission to do it, here it is. And you can give people my email. And if they need a pep talk on how to get started, they can just email me. I just started with a group of my girlfriends, something called the Women's Brain Trust. The entire purpose behind the Women's Brain Trust is for, you know how you do all these awesome women's groups and everything like that. And there's not always a lot of follow-up after you leave so inspired. And it's like, well, how do I do this? Well, we need to start committees. And one of the things I'm working on and that we're going to be acknowledging in this very first Women's Brain Trust is the lack of women that are nominated for awards and accolades across our countries. So what I want to see this rush of awesome women being nominated for all the things. And I want to start committees where people like us can take all of the information and nominate like 50 women that we know. And we'll have all of the criteria, everything, so that whoever wants to be nominated, and I hope they feel empowered to nominate, and they don't want to self-nominate, they can send us all the information, including the letter that they wrote on their behalf to us, telling them how great they are. We put our little signatures and we send it in. And if we can do that for 50 of our closest women, imagine what we can do. It's a momentum building thing. Women, we need to stand in our own light, but we have to be strong enough to know that about ourselves. That's a self-love thing. That's an in the mirror moment thing. That's a, I can do this thing. You get up out of the house and you help your neighbor. You do that. And women are already doing that, but they just don't see that that's a credibility thing to who they are. Like, let's already acknowledge what they're doing. The assumption is that nobody's doing anything. They're already doing all of these things. They're already helping out in their family, helping raise their children. They may feel overwhelmed that they can't get involved in a large organization. That's okay. They don't have to be huge things. It could simply be that you're making food for a neighbor that is sick, or that you're, helping out to coordinate a food bank. That requires you maybe an hour or two a week to go in and make sure that, I don't know, that there's halal options for, families that require that, or vegetarian for families that require that, or whatever it is, right? Or maybe you have a pickup truck and you can go pick up bread from like the bread sale or something. These are little things. And I think people feel overwhelmed that they have to do 1,000 things. And I know I can be a little overwhelming because I just do all the things because that's just the way my brain works, which is not necessarily the right thing to do either. But one of the things we can do for each other in our communities is give a list of opportunities saying, we need an hour from you once a month, or, we need 4 hours a month from you. Communities are losing out from getting those volunteers by not actively seeking smaller pieces of the pie to be able to come together to create these big momentums. And, they make friends and become part of committees and start working together and realize that this outreach and that this community that we build amongst each other in our tribes are really, really important for the well-being of our communities.
I appreciate you talking about momentum and the fact that people have a tendency not to look back and see their journey and not celebrate the small wins along the way. We look at the big goals, and I think that's why oftentimes we get overwhelmed, is because we go from 0 to 1 million instead of going after those little impactful wins along the way. So that's a great lesson for anybody listening, is don't set a goal that is unachievable today. It may be unachievable. It may be achievable in the future. However, you need to take those little micro steps along the way. And you're absolutely right. It does take a village. The entire premise of this show was because we were encountering woman leader after woman leader who wasn't able to state her value proposition and wasn't able to recognize her value in the first place. So it's like Christy and I looked at each other and we said, well, instead of doing it one person at a time, let's share those extraordinary stories and let's put them on the spot so that they can realize how extraordinary they are by asking them the questions that lead them to those aha moments that are happening along the way that we don't realize are happening. On your day-to-day today, like after this wonderful journey coming from a diverse family and learning along the way that, everybody needs to step up and help their village, how do you continue that mission today?
I think for me, so my husband, just to share with you, so we've been married for 31 years, together for 35. And my husband's a recovering alcoholic. And the reason I bring this up is because impact and momentum, to restate what you just said, Aggie, is all about the little things. And those what seems like a minor move is actually massive for some people. And it requires practice. You have to practice being involved. You have to practice putting yourself out there. You have to, it's a part of like, it's like, learning how to put on makeup, or, learning how to figure out your computer stuff. Like I was saying this morning, I couldn't figure out this Google Doc stuff, but today I've put my head to it. I'm like, I'm going to figure out how to do this, right? These are beautiful opportunities versus being barriers, I suppose, for lack. And for me, the reason I bring up my husband is because through this whole process, and I mean, that would be a whole other show talking about addiction and mental health and all of the things, because while I was elected as well, we were going through all of this. So we had to deal with this very publicly. And I'm actually very grateful for that, because the human side of what you go through in addiction and mental health requires all of us to just drop all of the nonsense and all of the, the masks, and just be very human in the moment. And it forced me to deal directly with all of that and our children and everything we were going through at that time. But the possibility of change and opportunity and momentum and what your value is and your worth is only as much as what you truly believe in yourself. And then the community helps to build that. Like my husband would be the first person to tell you, like, he had to decide that he wanted to choose family over alcohol. And it's a brutal decision. Like for them, they are completely regulated by the amount of alcohol or whatever it is that's in their system, right? That's how they function. When he chose us over that, he had to redefine who he was as a human and redefine his parenting, his relationships with his sons, with his family, with me. And it took so much work to do that. But I've seen what that does. And that's just in our family. And it changed everything for us, guys, like everything. That small thing to one person, like it's just a statement, right? To the regular people. But anybody who knows what I've been through or understands that this journey is not defining who you are, but it helps for us to understand the privilege and the beauty of what is possible when you come through something like that, no matter what the outcome. The outcome is what it is. None of us can, especially for a person who's in addiction, they have to make the decision. You can't make it for them. And that's the point of what I'm saying, is that you're wondering about momentum. We have to make these decisions. We have choice. We have opportunity. We have all of the tools and toolkits. And yes, there are barriers, but there are women and people who are facing health concerns that have real things that are actually stopping them from maybe walking out their door, but they have this other opportunity to be able to grow and build within themselves, because everything matters and everything is important. All of the little things matter. And so if we can leverage that strength of that human spirit and our capacity to overcome versus our capacity to be victims, I just don't want to see people circling the drain. And the way that society is that 20% circling the drain seems to be okay. I am not okay with that. I want to see people survive and thrive, and that the thrive side of things is where we end up. So the momentum has to be that, okay, I'm all of these experiences over here, all of this. Again, a whole other show could be on trauma and the trauma-informed discussions that need to happen, right? But I'm not that. I'm not that thing. I am a combination of all of these things and this incredible person who is standing on her own 2 feet right now, despite all of that stuff, right? And all of the definitions that we define ourselves by need to be leading towards the next step. That could be just going out your front door. That could be that, you're going to go and volunteer for something. It could be 1,000 different things. Whatever that little thing is, to come back to your point, Aggie, celebrate it. And momentum is only built on people who are feeling the outcomes of their actions. We can't build it for them. We can tell a person they're beautiful every single day of their life. We can empower all of these wonderful things and open doors and have policy and blah, 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 all of these things. But the truth is that until we see the momentum of our people, of our communities, paddling in the same direction, that our value is part of that team, and how we stand on our own. Nobody is good on their own. I don't care how much of an island you are. You require, if you're a musician, you want clapping and accolades for your music. If you are a podcaster, you want the feedback of the women that you are talking to give you the momentum and the desire to continue on this rock star process that you're on right now to elevate the women around you. If you're a politician, you want your legislation passed and that legacy of that change that you're bringing down the pipeline. If you are a lawyer, you want to make sure that the outcomes are in favor of your clients. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on. Whatever your thing is, if you look on YouTube or Facebook and you see all of those posts about dogs that need help all over the world, help a dog, foster a puppy, donate to one of those causes, go and volunteer at a shelter. If children are your main thing, start writing a blog post about moms and what you're going through and how you can help. If you're a mother of an autistic son like I am, talk to everybody about autism and help elevate the discussion around that so our children have the strength and the capacity to function in a world that doesn't understand them. These are those little things, and you don't have to be an activist. You just have to activate yourself.
I loved that. You don't have to be an activist. You just have to activate yourself. There's so much power in that. And it's just the one step, even if it's for you, recognizing that one step for yourself can create a huge impact for others as well. So beautiful. Leah, What does the next 5 years look like for you?
Another loaded question. Okay. Well, at this point in time, so I was with a biotech company, which I loved. I'm still on their advisory board, but I've found that as I was traveling a ton, and I talk to everybody, which is like hilarious because it doesn't matter where I am in the world. I just blah, 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 blah. And I found as I was meeting with people or governments or officials or dignitaries that there are so many sectors that require a lens of understanding how we bridge globally between our countries and how we help all of that. And so my real joy, my real love right now is in those intersections and connecting. So on energy, healthcare, women, the agriculture, all of these things, and finding out within these. So we've got AI, we've got large language models, we've got pipelines that are able to collate massive data. We have data centers, we have blockchain, we have all of, it's a lot. And I love puzzles. So I think where my biggest strength lies, and so I just reopened my company. I have Slam Industries now, which is working on bilateral trade and really connecting. I have more clients than I know what to do with at this point in time, which is a good problem to have. But I've had to bring on a lot of really amazing people, and none of us are monetizing it at this point. It's all of like the idea of how we help connect, and then we can look at monetize. I've never worried about that. Prosperity always follows the hustle. You just have to hustle. It always is there. I've never been worried about it. I've always been able to make it work out. So the way that we've put together several different organizations and committees between India and Canada and say Africa and Canada, of course, which is spread out to multi-countries. But what I find is really interesting is that there are so many people that want to see these bilateral trade, and it's not transactional. It's relationship building. It's eyeball to eyeball. Like I'm going to India again for the third time this year in December to meet with elected officials and businesses and to get MOUs signed on particular business opportunities. Some of them are really aspirational and like big picture things. Others are a little bit more granular that we can work specifically at that level. But there's there's the politics, there's the policy, there's the geopolitics, there's the regulatory, all of this stuff. And so there's a lot of opportunity in this space for people who are interested in growing their businesses and strategically looking at the global opportunities. There's so much opportunity out there right now. And for those of us who are connectors, it's like the best time. And especially from a Canadian perspective, like this is Canada's time at this moment to really, really, I think, break into that space. And India and Canada both have Westminster models, and we have very, very similar ways that our countries run. So the fact that we don't have more global trade between us is just a crying shame. So I'm really looking forward to seeing those pipelines open and to be a part of those discussions. And so in the next 5 years, my goal honestly is that I want to have so much prosperity and so much opportunity in this that then I can fund all of the nonprofits and organizations that I really believe in. And these would be not through my name. You wouldn't know it's me. It's not about that. But I want to be able, there's so many things that I want to fund, really great organizations that have massive outcomes, especially in human trafficking and in the space of women and girls and prostitution, all these kinds of things, to really, really, really open the door and shine really bright lights on how it is that we shut this crap down, right? Just to be blunt. And the blockchain, Web3, all of this, there's huge opportunities in being able to monitor and oversee and try and shut some of this stuff down. So ideally for me, like I love like the whole veteran space, women's needs, shelter, human trafficking. I mean, the list goes on and on. Puppies and that they need help, whatever it is. For me, in the next 5 years, I want to be able to roll all of this great work into that nonprofit sector. So my business is going to have a couple of arms. I'll have my for-profit side, which is the Slam Industries. We'll have the nonprofit side, which will be working really hard to build some of this infrastructure and working like on actual infrastructure, like bricks and mortar, but also on the side of legislation and policy and the people who are working in those sectors. And then also on the Women's Brain Trust side is bringing this tribe, all of these incredible women that I meet, into a space on LinkedIn where we can share all of our things, like so that your podcast, you can share your links of these awesome women on a different platform, that so you might meet other just incredible women that just rock your world, and to bring into the podcast or whatever. Those are kind of the three things, and I believe through those actions that we can really elevate the strength of women and what we're doing. And if I have powerful opportunities to make powerful change, that's the goal.
I love that. We usually end the show by asking our guests to share a lesson that they've learned, but I feel like we've shared lesson upon lesson. So instead of asking you about a lesson, I will ask you on what can our listeners do to help you move your mission from what it is today to that 5-year vision.
You have to take a girlfriend by the hand and be there and help. That's it. It's that simple. Or if you have a guy friend or whatever the fluidity of gender, whatever that is, whoever that is in your community that you might misunderstand a little or not quite understand, take the opportunity to learn about that person. That growth will change your brain. It doesn't mean you have to agree. It doesn't even mean you have to like each other. But it's about growing community. The essence of community isn't whether you're right or wrong. It's about how you function together as a team to grow. And if you can do that, if you take a girlfriend to go vote, if you help to go and door knock for, diabetes or heart health, or you find a community leader that you really, really are inspired by, and you donate $5 to something that she's doing, or like I said, like I have, so much of my life has been because men have believed in me. So those guys, help them to help elevate women. These are small, teeny weeny steps. It doesn't have to be massive. If you're looking at stuff about menopause online and you see the gaslighting that goes on about menopause, post the darn thing. Even if you're not in menopause yet, change healthcare by posting about what we need as women who are in perimenopause and menopause, so that we can function in society and find out that we're more than a walking inflammation, and that we just require Tylenol and meditation to try and deal with it. Get over yourself. What is the superpower in our cycles, right? How do we help young women understand that their bodies are precious, and that these are temples, and that they should take time with these beautiful little bodies that they have to discover who they are before they're giving it away into whatever, the grown-up world? How do we give these little girls that perspective and that beautiful understanding and just that moment in time to really respect and love who they are as people? These are things that any woman in any community can help out with their friend's daughter or their friend's sons. I have 2 sons. I have raised amazing boys, and my husband raised amazing men. And those men are going to be great partners and understand women, believe me, so well. And my legacy has nothing to do with anything else that I've done, other than I've put really great men into the world. Really, really great men. And so our responsibility for raising sons is to raise great men. Our responsibility to our daughters is for them to see their value and to understand that mind, body, and soul, that they have so much to offer, right? And I know people say these things, but let's do it. Little things. Have community, start a little get together for your girlfriends where your daughters come and you read together about empowering women and what a young girl can do. These kids, man, they've got so many ideas, and the leadership qualities that I see I work with a bunch of young ladies that are under the age of 35. I can't even keep up with their amazingness. But I got involved with them because they wanted to talk to me about my life. I'm like, oh, heck no. No. You guys are the leaders. What do I do to help you? Right? So those are little things. If I could give one little lesson, please hold the hand of somebody beside you and just be there for them and help them to their next step, or find somebody who can help you to your next step. Reaching out and asking for help is the strongest sense of empowerment you could ever do for yourself.
Well, on this note, we'll make sure that part comes out extra loud for everybody to hear. We so appreciate you sharing your wisdom, your journey, your story with us and our listeners. And we wish you nothing but the best for the next 5, 10, 40 years. And I feel like we should call Sarah McLachlan and see if we could get the license to In the Arms of an Angel, because that would be a really great tune for this episode since we talked about puppies.
Oh my God. Oh, I know, right? Like, oh, my heart. I just want to say thank you to both of you for the opportunity, for trusting me with this beautiful hour of your time. And this is so precious to me that you would consider me valuable to be coming on your podcast. And please lean on me if there's anything I can do. If you hear from anybody who may need that girlfriend for a hand, for an email, for a phone call, please count me in. And just know that there's those of us who love you and what you're doing so much and elevate you, and just literally pray for you every day that you continue on with this incredible work that you're doing. So much love to all of you.
Thank you so much.
All right, ladies. See you next week. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did recording it. If you like our show, please rate us, drop us a review on your favorite streaming app, and we'll catch you on the next episode. This was the Badass Women in Business podcast by Christine Ag.